Team with Money Matters. Today I've got two absolutely amazing people with me. I've got Areeb Siddiqui from Kestrl, and I've got Mufti Faraz Adam, who is the eminent Mufti around Islamic finance, especially here in the UK. So today's session, I'm going to kind of run through the way this is going to work. We've got a bit of an agenda around generally money matters and some of the things that we should be considering as Muslims, how we make money and how we actually manage our finances and our obligations, both in terms of the hereafter and this world. And then I'm going to hand over to Areeb and Faraz to kind of go through some of the things that they're going to talk about. But the first thing I want to talk about is very, very briefly before I do proper introductions, is the concept of money in Islam. Now, in Islam, we don't have the kind of stigma around money that some of the other traditions have. We are encouraged to trade. Our Prophet Rasulullah was, one of the things he did was be a trader. He was a shepherd, but he was also a trader. He went off, he traded, he was a merchant. Some of the most famous Sahaba, Uthman, for instance, was a very wealthy man. Hazrat Abdul Rahman ibn Auf was very, very wealthy. And we know that idea continued, that you should trade and you should look after your families and you should look after yourselves. There's a level of responsibility that's given to Muslims to go out and make money and use that money for good. So there's a bit here that links into community building, which is absolutely key. I mean, the fact that we are told to go out and make money is not only for ourselves, but it's to ensure that our community is not falling behind. It's to establish the ideas that Islam has given us. And that responsibility kind of flows to ourselves, our children, our wives' children or husbands' children, and into our wider families, into our neighbors, into our communities, into our countries. It's a really important concept of this concentric circle that we have responsibility around, and that responsibility is not only it's not only horizontal, it's upwards, it's towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well, and that's what zakat is about. And Mufti Faraz will definitely talk about this, but that obligation to cleanse our wealth is there, and it's a really important one. So we'll touch on some of those things. So the idea of personal finance is hugely important. I feel like in the last 10 years, we've really begun to think about the issues around the traditional Western architecture that's set up to create wealth, and how we need to kind of be careful, because before we've had this idea of we can't do anything. We're in a situation where we can't get out of the world of interest. But now, alhamdulillah, there's options, there's ways of getting out of that world of interest. And I think some of the things that we're going to talk about, we'll go through that. One of the things I wanted to suggest to everybody listening is a really great, I think it's about 25 minutes, half an hour at the most. There's a YouTube video by a guy called Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio is a typical Western, he's a wealth manager. I think he's one of the huge hedge funds, and he wrote a really great book, which I recommend, which is called Principles. But he's done a really great YouTube video, which is called How the Economy Works. And if you watch this video, the gist of that is the whole economy works on borrowing money from the future and bringing it to the present. And there's parts of that which are powerful and important, but what that also shows is how the traditional or the Western money markets take advantage of speculative nature of the environments that we're in. So I really recommend that. Watch it not once, but at least 2 or 3 times, because it's really good. It's well worth a watch. And it's from that angle of being very, this is the way we do things and this is the right way of doing it. But if you're a Muslim, it kind of shows you that there are other ways of doing things, and they stop some of the issues that happen in the traditional Western markets. So now what I'm going to do, inshallah, I'm going to allow the other people on the call to speak as well. We have 2 great eminent brothers, and I really appreciate both of the guests here today. So I'm going to allow the elder of our 2 guests to go first. I hope you don't mind me saying that, Mufti Faraz, and I'm assuming you're the elder one. So would you like to do a brief introduction, tell us a bit about yourself, and then we'll hand over to Areeb, inshallah.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah khair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain amma ba'd. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you all here. I'd like to thank Brother Wasim for his introduction and sharing some really inspirational words there. Just those key points I think are really important, and they're addressing what we all need to learn from this session, right? So it's a really good introduction. In terms of like an intro to myself, I mean, my background is in Sharia, and at present right now I am a Sharia advisor at Kestrl. So alhamdulillah, I'm on both sides up here. I'm also working with Kestrl and I'm also working with NZF, and so I'm really well placed to talk on both ends. So that's who I am.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And Areeb?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Areeb Siddiqui. I'm the founder and the CEO of an app called Kestrl. We aim to help Muslims to budget, to save, and to invest in line with their values. So ultimately helping them to achieve their goals without compromise. And we've just launched our app today. So please do go and check us out on the App Store and on Google Play. Thank you very much. I don't know how sensible it was launching that app on the same day as this event, but we'll see how it goes.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, it's all good. So, should we jump into the kind of key topics here? I think the idea of and the importance of personal finance, we've already touched on not only the strength that it will give us, but the concentric circles and the strength that it can give those around us. And I think one of the issues, especially here in the UK, that British Muslims are. How are we doing in the two of your kind of opinions? How do you think we are? Where are we in the hierarchy of different types of people?
Yeah, and unfortunately, the statistics show, and this was done by Muslim Council of Britain a few years ago, and more recently by Muslim Census, who've been doing some amazing work. So shout out to those guys. Muslims represent some of the poorest socioeconomic classes in the UK today, unfortunately, primarily made up of British Pakistanis and British Bangladeshis. They tend to work more manual jobs, more lower paid jobs. And also in the past year alone, because of that, working in sort of taxi businesses or restauranting, they're much more likely to have been affected by lockdown, having been much more likely to have been furloughed or to have lost their jobs entirely. So unfortunately, that has exacerbated the situation. And these socioeconomic groups have been disproportionately affected compared to other people within the UK. So yeah, that's unfortunately the case in the UK. This is such a big problem that does need to be tackled.
So Mufti Faraz, you've kind of have worked in the community and have a really good rounded view of the situation of the Muslims in the UK. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, as Areeb said, look, the stats speak for themselves, to be honest. I think from our end, one of the key things which are lacking is education. I think we're so focused on dealing with finances and funds the way we've just inherited from our parents and back home. The financial services, the financial kind of framework that we have, and different products available were not there, 50 years ago. And so this idea of engaging and dealing with different services, investing as a strategy hasn't really been embraced. It's only now the new generation which are beginning to embrace. Of course, the high net worth individuals were always investing, but we have this huge gap, right, where we have those who are either in the middle or struggling. Investment has never been part of their focus or on the radar. It's just been about struggling from day to day, just making ends meet. And you can't blame them, we understand that. So that's one thing, I think, education and understanding investing. The second thing, which is key, is the lack of Sharia compliant options relatively. Of course, now we're seeing an increase, right? And as you can see on the Kestrl app, right, people can start investing in different areas, which is brilliant, and tap into different investment opportunities. But there was, I would say, 10 to 15 years ago, we never had the ecosystem we have now, right? And it's only increasing because of fintech, right? It's only increasing because after the global financial crisis, when the regulation increased for banking, alternative finance came about. And that has opened up opportunities to bring together investors and borrowers, so to speak, right, onto one platform, and for cash flows to move in a different direction, in a different way, instead of having banks all the time sitting in the middle. So it's very interesting, I think, now what's happening with education increasing and more opportunities for investing. I think these two are, it's like a two-pronged approach for the growth of Islamic finance, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. And what's interesting, it feels like the traditional point of view for at least people, like my family, quite not hugely educated, from a relatively simple background. The idea was save your money, right? And if you're struggling to save your money, use kind of community structures like committees to get money together and have some way of at least saving your money. And then a lot of the time it was, the way my dad would work is buy some land at home, because he understood that, right? It was, I will have this much £1,000 and then I will spend that. It will turn into this many rupees and we'll buy some land, and then X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And there's those related socioeconomic kind of shifts up will happen. Because that was the thinking, that was the prevalent thinking in those times. And I think you're 100% right. One of the things that I wanted to ask both of you about is, I agree with you 100% that there is this issue of, there are these new structures in place that can help us. What are the effects of not using those structures? What's happened because we are in these lower kind of socioeconomic categories?
So I'd love to tackle that first, Faraz, if you're okay with that. So I mean, what we've seen over at Kestrl is that generally in the UK, regardless of whether you're Muslim or not, there is a financial literacy problem in the UK. The majority of people don't know much about investing. They don't know much about saving and some of the basics about budgeting and building up an emergency fund. That's not something that is taught within schools. We're not teaching kids that, the basics about a mortgage, savings account. That's not really taught, or how banks work. With Muslims, it's a two-factor problem. It's not just the financial literacy part, it's the Islamic financial literacy element to that as well. In that many Muslims, in our survey, which we did at Kestrl, we surveyed 1,000 people up and down the country. 90% of Muslims care about Islamic finance and banking Islamically in some way. However, very few of us understand that at all. So it's almost a compounded problem where you've got financial literacy and then Islamic financial literacy coming together to prevent people actually bringing themselves out of those situations. Because when you dig down into it, right, in terms of that whole entire personal finance journey from, building a budget, creating that emergency fund, paying off your debts, savings, everyone forgets about those parts and they just focus on the end, which is investing. And they get swept away by all of these fancy terms such as NFTs and crypto and Bitcoin and all of this stuff, which is really in the hype right now. And if you know what you're talking about, you can do very well. But the majority of people do not, unfortunately. So they get caught up in that. They get bogged down in whether that is halal or haram. And then they end up not really doing much about it, unfortunately, or unfortunately going into it and losing out on that. So I think it is a literacy problem, and it's where what we've seen at Kestrl, what we're trying to do with our app, which we'll demo in a little bit, we're trying to solve each part of that personal financial journey, and we can go into that in a bit more detail as well.
And one thing I'll just like to add, if you raise that up slightly, the effects of deprivation on the Muslim community is tragic, because what that means is that we are in the lowest percentages in terms of education generally. We are overrepresented in the jail population. We are overrepresented in areas like drug issues and family issues and so many other problems. And there is a demonstrable link between deprivation and these sorts of socioeconomic issues. And the sad thing is that Rasul set up this system, obviously via Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, set up this, sorry, the other way around, excuse me. Allah set up this system via Rasul to stop those sorts of things happening, right? There was a system of governance for the world which would then help you get to your akhirah. But we've kind of forgotten both of those things at the same time. And that's the tragic thing, I think. And I think the next step is what are the ways forward? How do we then raise ourselves up? What are the tools? What are the frameworks that we can use? If we consider ourselves for a second, at least you two can consider yourselves for a second, well-educated, well-off Muslims, what can we do which will raise up the rest of us?
I mean, just to go on to that, so you're absolutely right. I mean, we're lost. We're neither here nor there, right? When we speak about as a community, and I think that's what Sharia is all about, right? When you use the word Sharia, what does Sharia mean? Sometimes it can be a taboo word for many people, and for many areas, people get scared with the word Sharia. But Sharia, linguistically, what it means is it's the path, right, to a source of water. So think of a desert, right, where it's so barren. There's no water. It's hot. Water is a precious commodity in that market. Of course, everywhere, but especially in a desert. So the path which takes you to a source of water, that path is known as Sharia linguistically, right? Technically, Sharia means a code of conduct, the system that you just mentioned for governance. What's the connection between the linguistic meaning and the technical meaning? The connection is just as the source of water is sustainability, it's life for humanity, right? Likewise, this code that Allah has given to us, it's life, it's sustainability, it's development, it's growth for us, for our life and the akhirah. That's what the whole thing about Sharia is. So if we want to revive ourselves, if we want to really develop as a community and nation to be ones who are beneficial to the whole of mankind, we have to learn from the Sharia. Right? The teachings of Sharia are so beautiful. From financially, I mean, the amount of education we have in finance in Sharia, it's amazing. It's beautiful. And you're asking what should we do about it? I think it's two things which Kestrl, I believe, are doing really well. One is product development, right, which is absolutely important. Just giving increasing opportunities. And second is literacy, right? Islamic financial literacy, which is also very important. When these two things come together, that's when you'll start seeing, the magic happening, so to speak.
Absolutely. And what's your take on that, Areeb?
No, I couldn't agree more. It's been a journey that we've been learning. When we started Kestrl, it all started with a single question, which was, I was at university and my friend who was from Malaysia asked me a single question, which was, why aren't you using an Islamic bank? He saw me paying for lunch one day with a debit card, which is one of the conventional banks, and was like, well, why aren't you using that? And he found it odd because Islamic banking is relatively the norm out in Malaysia. And we were both practicing Muslims. We would go to the prayer room every day, make sure we were eating halal. He was like, well, why aren't you using an Islamic bank? And I immediately started coming up with this answer like, oh, well, my parents signed me up to this when I was 16, and we don't really have any good options in the UK. But like the horrible truth began to dawn on me was that I didn't really know why I wasn't using an Islamic bank. I'd always just assumed that there wasn't a real option for me in the UK. It was just sort of ingrained into me, and no one had sort of said it. I just sort of heard it that, there's not really that many good options out there unless you like literally live in front of one of the branches of one of those banks. And that didn't sit right. And then when I really dove into it, and I think this resonated with a lot of people when we asked them, what did I actually know about Islamic finance? The only thing was interest is bad. And I didn't know anything beyond that. And the whole thing was avoid it where you can, but it's actually quite hard to avoid it. So, there's not really a lot you can do about it. And the most embarrassing thing about all this is that the point that this happened, I had been working in and around financial services for 5 years at that point in banking and in assets and wealth management. And I just thought, well, is this just me or is it everyone? So that's why we did that nationwide survey. And we found I was not alone in that. That is how the majority of people see it. Everyone knows that there is something to be done, but because of the lack of options that are out there, most people just sort of give up before looking. So that was the basis behind Kestrl. We're really trying to democratize finance and also Islamic financial literacy so that it makes it much, much more easy for people to get their hands on this and actually achieve their financial goals without them feeling they have to compromise. So that's what we're doing, starting with budgeting, moving on to saving, and then investing. And of course, our partnership with National Zakat Foundation, you can donate through us as well now.
That's fantastic. So we're going to touch on some of the mistakes that people make, that Muslims make when it comes to finances. But just on the other channel, my niece Nabila has asked a question, and I think now would be a good time to ask it. But I know that you'll answer it later on. She said, "Can we talk about how and what to invest in?" Which I think is pertinent questions. and what platforms are safe and halal. So I think Areeb, you will be perfectly placed, and I'll remind you later on about those questions. So the next little piece I'm gonna go on to are what are some of the big mistakes, and we've already touched on some of this. It's the 25, 30-year-old thinking, I think, is one of the key mistakes that we all make. What are some of the other ones? And Areeb, why don't you go first on this one? What are the big mistakes you feel like Muslims are making?
Yeah, sure. I think it's less about Muslims.
And just to clarify, there's two parts here. So there's mistakes they're making in terms of investing, and mistakes they're making in terms of what they're investing in being not right. So I think that second part, I think Mufti Faraz, if you pick that up.
Okay, sure. All right. So in terms of mistakes they're making, it's less of a Muslim problem. I think it's more of a people problem in general. Like we touched on earlier, everyone jumps into the investing part because it's the cool part. It seems more fun. They see multiple returns. They get swept away in the social media hype. Maybe someone they saw on TikTok who made loads of money, and the same on Instagram, all of that kind of thing, which is fine. But they fall into a trap, which is more, okay, I can make money really, really quickly in the short term, as opposed to what investing is meant to be. And if you read any kind of investment book out there, it's all about long-term gain. So anyone who's looking to make a multiple return in the very short term, that's really more akin to speculation. In that, if you are going to invest in something like day trading or crypto, and you're looking to make a multiple return over a few days, then you have to accept that the asset that you're investing in is influenced by forces beyond just the actual worth of the asset itself. It could be that Elon Musk puts out a tweet and suddenly the price skyrockets, or he's seen doing something a little bit dodgy on a podcast and then the price plummets, and you could lose all of that money in the blink of an eye. So the main thing that I'm trying to get across here is that if you are going to invest, you should invest for long-term goals in general. And I should preface all this that nothing that we're saying here is financial advice or investment advice.
Yeah,
in any way. It's just general guidance in that way. So if you are going to invest, you should be investing for long-term goals. And by long-term goals, we mean literally 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the future. And the reason we say that is because in the short term, investments can go down as well as up, and you can lose a lot of money as well. Imagine if you had invested just before lockdown occurred, right? If you take a look at the FTSE 100 or any kind of market, there's a massive drop that happened. Yeah, exactly, right? Imagine you had invested on that day, you would have thought that was the worst day of your life, right? If you'd invested a significant amount. Yeah. However, if you notice, over the past year, the markets have recovered, right? And they've moved generally upwards and to the right. I don't know if it's going to the right on my camera, but upwards to the right, right? So the idea is that generally in the long term, in the short term, there'll be fluctuations all over the place. And some of the best investors in the world, like Warren Buffett, they understand this, right? Warren Buffett has been investing for 80 years. He's 90 years old, mashallah, and he's been investing since the age of 10, right? And he has lived through something like 14 recessions, crises, all of that, right? So he's seen it all. But the main thing that has worked for him is because he's been doing it so long, he hasn't been taking major risks, right? A lot of his money has been, following the set rules of investing, which is invest for the long term, diversify your investments, all of that good stuff. But the main thing is that because he's been in the game so long, he's benefited from something called compounding. And compounding is really all about where the small returns that you make year on year, you reinvest those returns. So those returns are making returns in and of themselves. So over time, that affects that literally snowballs. So it literally can become an exponential type of return, whereby that's why Warren Buffett today is worth 90 billion, for example. Whereas if he started literally 20 years later, if he started at age 30 instead of age 10, he'd be worth a fraction of what he is today. So that's the power of compounding. And of course, I'm speaking here from a general investment perspective. I'll leave it to Mufti for us to talk from the Sharia kind of perspective on that as well. But that is a significant mistake that a lot of people make, is they fixate on short-term gains in investing and generally, if you're looking for a short-term goal, something you're trying to achieve in the next 5 years, like getting married or buying a car or getting a house, you're usually much better off just saving for something like that, because you'll need liquid returns. If you invest, yes, you could make a lot of money, but you could lose all of that. Whereas saving, it's a near guaranteed return, right? So therefore, you can rely on that much more. So that's the biggest.
And I think just to touch on something you said there right at the beginning, this Instagram, TikTok kind of lifestyle stuff is really dangerous. It is obviously a symptom of the materialistic world that we live in, and for Muslims especially, this is a slippery slope. And actually, if you want to build wealth, it's a slippery slope as well. There's no need for you to go out and buy a £100,000 car or something stupid like that these people have. Often they're borrowed, right? It's a fake thing, and I think we need to be super careful of that. And washing our money away, trying to chase kind of a fake wealth. It's better off. It's better off just saving and thinking about what builds real wealth, and I think that's really important, and that's a key mistake that not only Muslims make but many modern people make now.
I mean, look, there's a key differentiation between getting wealthy and staying wealthy, in that to accrue wealth, that can happen in the blink of an eye. And it requires all kinds of things like risk taking, being opportunistic, all these being bold, all of that. Staying wealthy requires many of the opposite kind of requirements. It requires being humble, being grateful, and there's many examples from the Hadith and from the Quran of people who were bad at that and also good at that. And it often reminds me, Mufti Faraz is much more a better place to talk about this, but it reminds me of the story of the two gardens in Surah Al-Kahf, and the man who was given a lot of wealth, and he believed that Allah loved him because of that, and he would never be able to lose that wealth. And that is the kind of attitude which you could literally lose that wealth in the blink of an eye, by assuming that all of that has something to do with you, as opposed to factors outside of your control.
And Mufti Faraz, in terms of the, I don't want to say fiqh, but the more Islamic side of that question, which is, what are the biggest mistakes that Muslims make when it comes to their personal finances? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, even just carrying on from what you just mentioned, there's this whole kind of mindset now, which is instant gratification. We love the dopamine shots, right? That's what it's all about. It's just everything has to be instant. So when you're making an investment, it has to be something instant, right? And many a time is from life, when we see all good things comes to those who wait, right? Embracing long-termism, it's always good. I mean, think about weight loss, right? Something so simple. The weight is gained over a long term and weight is lost over a long term. It doesn't happen overnight, right?
No.
So if you want to lose weight, those who've gone through a discipline of 1-2 years, they know discipline is a daily thing. You have to monitor yourself. If you want to develop yourself spiritually, right, become a good person, those who've gone through that kind of like conditioning mechanism process of restraining themselves, it takes time. Likewise, to grow wealth also takes time. These things take time, unless somebody comes and awards you £1 million or whatever, right? Which is hardly ever the case. Things takes time, and from a Sharia,
I'm going to slightly challenge you on that, Faraz. I can put on weight like so quickly.
What, like 20 kilos in one day?
Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
No, I mean, look, 1-2 kilos is understandable, but seriously, when it comes to like 20-30 kilos, which people can put on, right? It's something which takes a lot of time, and we never look at that, right? So things are grown, and things take a lot of time in coming to fruition, so to speak. So from an Islamic perspective, the whole mindset that we should have in the psyche is really important. We shouldn't be about this instant gratification. Everything in our Sharia teaches us about being patient, being calm, being forward-looking, having that forbearance, understanding things, not being. That's why the hadith says, "Al-ujla min ash-shaytan," that this hastiness comes from shaitan. This desire, this quick win, this quick kind of gratification. These are impulses which don't befit a believer. So when it comes to investing from a Sharia perspective, what's really important is our money is used in the right way and it goes in the right channels. So it's extremely important. We can't be investing in junk, right? Junk, anything which is just like junk food is bad for you. Junk bonds and toxic stuff, right? Toxic investments are bad for your wealth, and it goes down to it impacts you spiritually as well as financially. I mean, we believe that, and this is the Quran tells us this, that يَمْحَقُ اللَّهُ الرِّبَى وَيُرْبِي الصَّدَقَاتِ. The Quran tells us that when a person deals with interest, it has a material impact in this world. It's not only a spiritual impact. Materially, there's an impact. You lose blessings, but what does it mean to lose blessings? It means Allah's safety is removed from you. That means you're more exposed to hardship. Whereas when you pay sadaqat, give in charity, Allah protects you from calamities, right? So when we invest, we have to stay away from those things. For example, like derivatives, like bonds, like CFD trading. What's really common now, and Areeb will totally get this, is it's so easy to invest in CFDs or bet and gamble on these apps. You can make a few bets and gamble, open a position, even forex trading, right? It's so common. You can just go on an app, download the app, put in some money, leverage 10 times, 20 times the amount that you've put in, and get a return. And in the retail market, this is so common. But unfortunately, many people don't know that it's not Sharia compliant, right? This whole mindset, this greed that's being created as a result. That's what's problematic. It's really problematic.
So what are the kind of two questions then? What are the 2 or 3 key principles that we need to remember? And let's give the people who are listening or watching some homework. What are the things that they need to go away and study and read to try and really get a good, or where will they go to find a really good guide to ensure that they're not making these really important kind of Sharia mistakes? So what are firstly the 2 or 3 principles?
Look, the first principle is make sure whatever you invest in it is halal. That's the first thing, right? So you can't invest in something which is not halal, right? As an asset class. Number 2, make sure you gain ownership of what you're investing in. A lot of the retail markets nowadays, these platforms that invest in online apps, you're just opening up positions. There's no real investment in any underlying asset. Number 3, make sure that when it comes to investments, that the structure, the contracts, everything is Sharia compliant. That's really important. Sometimes what happens is somebody might enter into a private equity investment, but there's preferred shares there, which is a problem from a Sharia perspective. There might be guarantees in place which can impact the Sharia compliance of the contract. So there's so many things like this. So 3 things: make sure first of all what you're investing in is halal. So you're not investing in, for example, a company which is producing alcohol, or a company which is producing tobacco or illicit adult material, these things, or has exposure to those markets through your investment. You don't want to do that. Number 2, ownership. Make sure you're actually owning something which is of value. You're not owning, investing in rubbish, right? A lot of NFTs, like some NFTs are absolutely ridiculous, right? There's just nothing there. So you have to be very careful that you're actually owning something.
So now that you've mentioned that, Mufti, just one of you tell people what NFTs are in a couple of short sentences.
Non-fungible tokens, right? That's what NFT stands for. Non-fungible tokens.
What do they mean?
So what it means? Areeb, go ahead, go on.
Oh yeah, correct me if I'm wrong.
It's funny. I find it hilarious.
A non-fungible token basically means a token that can't be replicated. So all it is right, it's a digital asset. It can be like a picture, it can be a video.
It could be a meme, right?
It could be literally like a meme, right?
Yeah.
Then the idea is that in the past, you were able to copy and paste those multiple times, right? And you'll never be able to find the original. Now what you can do using blockchain, which is basically this long digital receipt, is you can see which is the original, right? You can turn one of these memes into the number one, and suddenly that meme can become, as it can have the same status as something like the Mona Lisa, right? Or some really famous painting, because suddenly before you could never tell what was the original. Now you can assign the original to this, and because of that, you can assign some worth to it. So non-fungible means it's non-replicable, because this one can be marked as the original. And you're seeing everything from like people creating Pokemon cards and making this a shiny Charizard. If you know Pokemon, you'll know what that means. But this one is like this one's really valuable. And they're being sold for a lot. In terms of whether they're halal or not, Mufti Faraz did an amazing article on whether NFTs are halal or not. But ultimately, it really depends on what is being turned into an NFT. But I would recommend people check that out.
Yeah. And then we were going to go on to what's a good primer. Where can we go to kind of really, let's say I want to buy an NFT and I want to go, right, is that halal or not? Or actually, I'll give you an example. There's obviously I won't mention the person, but there's a person who does binary forex trading and is outwardly quite practicing. And where would I point that brother to get further details on whether something like that is halal or not?
I mean,
Sorry, on overly challenging question. Apologies.
no, I mean, what I would advise such a person is, look, consult scholars. Honestly, that's what they're there for, right? You're always welcome to approach me and ask me. You can go on my website, amanahadvisors.com, right? You're more than welcome to send a question across. And we'll answer the query. That's not a problem. But I would say always consult. There's a lot written online. You have to be very careful on what you read, especially in these areas. But just on Forex, right? Forex is a very problematic area, and unfortunately, people don't understand the Sharia issues and implications in there. I've actually written an entire research paper on Forex, which can be found online. So Forex is something which, again, it's available at the click of a button. And that's the thing, right? People, and on YouTube, you see these adverts, oh, invest in Amazon and you become rich, invest in Forex, you become rich. Those things don't help because it's human nature. We all want to be wealthy, right? We all want a disposable income. So it's, of course, we're going to find other ways to invest. So it's not a bad thing that you have the desire to invest. What we need to do is channel that energy that you have in the right way.
Absolutely. And I think just to follow on from that, one of the mistakes that people have made, and we were talking about kind of personal finance mistakes, Islamically, is not understanding the importance of your zakat. And I kind of specifically mentioned that because the next kind of little section I wanted to get into zakat a lot more. Tell us a little bit about what it means and what are some of the virtues associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, so look, zakat is like the third pillar of our faith, right? Islam has 5 pillars. Zakat is the third of the core pillars. It's been mentioned in the Quran 32 times, the word zakat, right? 30 times in the meaning of paying this financial payment. 28 times it's been interlinked with salah. So 28 times in the Quran, salah and zakat have come together, which shows the importance. When it comes to understanding what zakat does, zakat is an amazing practice. It has so many benefits for the individual, for the society, and for the beneficiary. Right? Zakat is a multifaceted, multi-benefit action. So it's amazing. And what does it really do? What is zakat all about? Honestly, it all comes back, as we mentioned, every practice in Islam is there to connect us back with Allah. It's as simple as that. At the end of it, the end all and be all is that. Look, let me tell you one thing, right? Why has Allah made things obligatory upon us? It's a question. Why is worship obligatory on us? Why? It's a question, right? Why do I have to go to the mosque or pray 5 times a day? Why do I have to fast in the month of Ramadan? I mean, the answer to that is, yes, it's Allah's command. A Muslim will tell you Allah's instructed and ordered this. But why has Allah ordered this? The reason is because, one of the reasons is, it's for our own salvation. Allah, out of His mercy, has made obligatory upon us that which will be a means of our own salvation. Right? So that's the mercy of Allah. If we don't perform these things, it will impact us negatively. Salah builds within us a certain capacity. Fasting builds within us fortitude. Zakat builds within us this charitable mindset. These pillars develop our kind of, you could say, internal disposition. And so Allah has made obligatory upon us only that which will be of our benefit and which will be in terms of our eternal life, our salvation. And therefore, these pillars are there to service us and to make sure that we can be successful, which is the most important thing in life, more important than anything else. That when a Muslim leaves this world, when a person leaves this world, this short-lived world, he's successful. And that's a forward-looking person. So that's what zakat does. Zakat is there, and to phrase it in a different way, one is connecting you with Allah, but then connecting the economy with Allah and Islam, right? Godliness. So zakat brings order to the chaos in the economy, right? To the markets and society. That's what zakat is all about. It brings order. There's so much chaos there. But zakat is about this, as you were talking about, Ray Dalio earlier, and what interest does, and we know interest creates disparity between the rich and the poor. What does zakat do? It actually closes that disparity. It brings people together. It's creating that kind of balance again in society and the economy. So it's an amazing way to incentivize people to spend, to invest, because if you don't invest your money, you have to pay zakat on it, right? But if I invest in property, the zakat is mitigated. So zakat encourages people to invest, to spend on others. It creates cash flow, as we know. Just like the body requires blood to flow, and the blood needs to flow for it to remain healthy. If it's congealed and stagnates, then it will impact the body. What zakat does, zakat is like the blood, or money is the blood of the economy. And zakat is just that. It's circulating in the economy. It needs to flow. Money needs to flow for the economy to function well. And we know that every one person's income is another person's expense, right? So it's this kind of this relationship which is being created through zakat.
Okay, and the in the Quran, there's like you said, it's in 32 places on zakat. The question that has come to my mind is, where, traditionally it was going to Beit al-Mal, right? Is that correct? Is it going to Beit al-Mal? We don't have those institutes, we don't have those structures anymore. So is it better to then give to our relatives, or is it better to give into places like NZF, which is obviously the reason NZF is designed and the reason, I personally support them. What's your in your mind on that? Is it does it matter, or is it better one way or the other?
No, so I mean, giving to your if you have needy relatives, it's always permissible. In fact, scholars have mentioned it's recommended to help those investors those relatives whom you can give zakat to. But we can't give zakat to your parents, to your children,
right?
To your grandparents, your grandchildren, to your spouse. But beyond that, just say you have a brother or sister who's needy, to give them zakat, absolutely no problem. In fact, scholars have said it's recommended to help them as well. But I would say the compounding benefit of giving to an institution, right, which is they are in a position to understand and do those kinds of any moral hazard, those risks that come about. They're in a position to financially screen somebody, which we might not be able to do. They might be able to add additional benefits, compounding benefits in a zakat grant, which we might not be able to do as an individual. When we give like a peer-to-peer, we might not be able to do that. But a zakat institution can add so many other benefits, services, signposting. It's a more value-adding, you could say, grant that's made through an institution than an individual. And that's why it makes a lot of sense to, what I always recommend is, give your zakat to people that are needy, but also think about how you can make an institutional impact across the entire nation, which is far more compounding and value-adding.
I think that there's an aspect that makes sense there for me. If I went to if I bought a duvet, it might be £20. But if we bought 1,000 duvets, you might be able to get them for £10. And that compounding effect can make
economies of scale, right? That's what it is.
Economies of scale, exactly right. And that there's a definite benefit there of giving to organizations like NZF. So a slightly personal question. I normally tend to give my zakat in the last 10 days of Ramadan, which is a habit, and it's kind of, in my mind, in my heart at least, maybe there'll be some conjunction between me giving zakat and on one of the last 10 nights. It might be Laylatul Qadr, I might hit the jackpot. Is there anything actually, is that based on anything, or is that just me being a bit kind of silly?
No, there's actually a hadith in Tirmidhi which says that if you pay in Ramadan, there is more reward. So there's a hadith about paying in Ramadan. And of course, we should be, the Messenger of Allah was more charitable in Ramadan than any other time. He would give so much. So I would say one thing for the viewers and for ourselves, don't restrict giving to zakat. Zakat is an obligatory payment. It's a payment. Yeah. It's not a charity. It's not a donation, right? It's very important. It's two different things, right? Zakat is something you have to do. Don't suffice on that. Yeah, of course, it's obligatory. You have to do it. But in Ramadan, try to be more, even if you can give 50p or £1 a day, right? There's just ways to automate it. Online, you have so many now apps where you can automate your giving. If you find it difficult to physically or literally or go and make a payment every day, just automate it. But be conscious that, yes, today I've made a payment, because that consciousness is really powerful for your soul, right? You don't want to be negligent or, completely unmindful, like you're making payments as well, right? Because it's not just an action you're doing. It's there to conceptualize what you're actually doing and practicing. So it's really important to do that.
So, Areeb, in terms of calculating your zakat, now, traditionally I've gone onto the NZF website and used their zakat calculator. And I say traditionally in the last few years since it's been around. is that something that you guys are linking into? How is the Kestrel kind of NZF relationship building? How does that working?
Yeah, so it's something that we were really keen on doing. We looked around. There are many Zakat calculators out there, very good. National Zakat Foundation blew me away in terms of the way that they calculated it and the kind of assets that they took account of. So everything from your investments, your ISAs, cryptos, pensions, all of that kind of thing, all within their methodology. So we, alhamdulillah, were very fortunate to be able to link up together, and they actually sit on our marketplace. So we did it just in time for Ramadan, where you can now download Kestrel and you can calculate your zakat using NZF's integrated calculator within our app. And what I'd love to do is show you a bit of a demo of how that works. So if the people on YouTube and Facebook can take a look at that, if that works for you.
That's cool. I mean, and this is useful because I had a question about, let's say if there's somebody who never paid in their life, so this could help that kind of issue.
Yeah, sure. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen now, and you'll be able to take a look at the Kestrel app. Those of you who are listening in on Clubhouse, if you want to click just on the link in the bio of our Instagram, which is linked in my Clubhouse profile, you'll be able to see what's going on live now as well. So let me know once.
Will you describe one thing for me while you're doing this? And this is going to be a key point, and it will clarify for myself and lots of other people the idea of nisab and what it means and how that whole thing works.
Yeah, so I think Mufti Faraz is much more better placed to do that. Should we get on to that once we are?
Why don't we do that? Yeah, good idea.
Okay, cool, perfect. So here it is. This is the app that you can download today. Kestrel, helping you to achieve your financial goals in line with your values. Can you all see what's going on screen? Mufti Faraz, Wasim, can you see this? I'm not sure if you can still hear me. Oh, okay. So you guys have gone to the background whilst that's happening. So I'll quickly just describe this, and then I will end that, and then you'll be able to be back on screen. So what you can see up here is that once you log on to Kestrel, you are on our homepage. So the homepage basically tells you the most pertinent information about your finances, from what you're subscribed to, your upcoming bills, transactions, and then you've got some cool money tips. You've got there me and my co-founder, you can see there. Top 5 merchants you've been spending at, and also what you have left to spend at. So what we have here is the budgeting page. And the budgeting, we always say, is the first step of the personal financial journey. Budgeting basically means that you're maximizing how much of your salary you can save every single month. What we do that for you automatically. We use something called open banking that allows you to plug in all of your banks, whatever you're using in the UK, directly into the app. We'll then see what your income is, ring fence how much you usually spend on essential spending, so like your bills, groceries, etc., and then how much you usually spend on non-essentials, which can be takeaways, movies, games, whatever it is that you're spending on. So here you can see a breakdown of what I'm spending at, transportation and groceries primarily in my essentials, and then you can see my non-essentials there. As you see, there's quite a lot on food. So yeah, and basically what you have there on that final line is savings, and that's how much I'm due to save this month, and that's all done automatically through the Kestrel app. You can see upcoming bills and commitments, which are ring-fenced here as well, so like a phone bill or Netflix, something like that. But this is the cool part, where you can connect to your banks. So this is all completely secure, read-only access. We aren't able to touch your money in any way, shape, or form, and your data is completely secure. And here we use our third-party true layer, which allow us to be open banking enabled. These are all of the banks that you can connect to through Kestrel. Just plug them straight in a very seamless sort of experience. So yeah, that's budgeting in a nutshell. This section is reserved for our savings. So we are, alhamdulillah, really pleased to be able to link up with some really cool savings providers coming up in the UK, inshallah. So we're going to have savings pots that you can build towards your short-term goals like we talked about earlier, but also you can generate a halal return right here as well, where we'll be partnering with some cool guys in the UK to be able to do that. And inshallah, hoping to be able to make that announcement in Ramadan. But then this is where NZF comes in, and this is our marketplace. Our marketplace is where all of our investment providers will sit, and we have some which will be onboarded during Ramadan. But at the very top, you can see the Zakat donation. So right now, we are, like we said, very pleased to link up with National Zakat Foundation, and you can see them right there. You have the option of giving your Zakat directly or calculating it, and you'll be able to see that right here. So this basically takes you into Zakat donation, the NZF's Give app. Remember, we were talking about the different assets that you might have and you might own, which you may need to pay Zakat on. Here, they break them down into these 8 areas. And just for the sake of this example, I'm selecting cash, pensions, cryptos, and gold and silver. You can also, there are some liabilities you can take off of that, such as mortgages on things which you don't have to pay Zakat on. You very quickly just fill that out through the app, how much cash you have in hand, for example, versus how much is in your bank account. And then very quickly, that will take you, you can just very quickly skip through into actually paying that Zakat. So here it's calculated, my Zakat payment is £375, which you can round up. All these other additional things which make the NZF calculator so different from other people's as well. And you can also choose to multiply that through Sadaqah and also gift aid for people in the UK. And finally, this is where the payment happens, directly or securely through NZF's payment portal. And that, in a nutshell, is basically our integration with NZF and what our app looks like today. So we've just launched, so please head on over to our website if you'd like to find out more, which is kestrl.io, kestrl.io. And yeah, you can download us on the App Store and on Google Play from there. Sorry, guys, I didn't realize your mics would be cut off whilst I was
No, it's cool. It's okay. I think that looks fantastic, Areeb. It looks really, really cool. So you've kind of gone live on that today.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. So that's available.
And it's on iOS and Android?
Yep, that's right, on both platforms. So please do give it a go. We'd love to know your thoughts.
We'll definitely give that a go. I will download that tonight and play with that. There was a question earlier that I just wanted to pick up on. Some of the platforms that are available here in the UK, what have you guys used? What do you guys think is a useful platform to kind of people to look at least, that you feel can benefit Muslims in the UK?
Sure. So
That's obviously a lot.
Yeah, none of this is investment advice in any way. What I can tell you about are a few of the people who are being onboarded onto our marketplace, who are Sharia compliant. Mufti Faraz knows them quite well, as well as their Sharia advisors. We have Kurdus coming on board onto our marketplace this month. Kurdus allow you to crowdfund into different small businesses, from pharmaceutical chains to restaurants, all those kind of good businesses. And they'll be available for investment through our platform. And we also have a really cool one called Minted. So Minted are quite interesting. They allow you to invest into gold, which is a very traditional asset class for many Muslims in Southeast Asia, especially, and also Arab cultures. So you can do that. So those are the first two who are coming onto our platform.
So I know the founders. Some of them, of both of those, and especially his name's Hassan Dalal, right?
Yes.
The Kurdus guy. Yeah, he's so impressive, young man. Really, really impressive. I had a chat with him probably about 6 weeks ago, and he told me he walked me through the platform and told me about what his journey has been, and I was really impressed with not only the way he's built that kind of that platform up, but his diligence and his need to be associated and be correctly regulated, both Islamically and kind of from the FCA, etc. And I think he's really, really good. So I would definitely recommend people having a look at Kurdus. That's Qardus, right? Areeb?
Yeah, that's right. And they'll be live on our platform during Ramadan as well, so you can check them out there as well. So that would be cool.
And one thing I'll mention, there is, further afield in places like UAE and Malaysia, there's lots of different platforms. Myself and Areeb have a friend, Dr. Areeba, not related to Areeb in any way, who's building a really interesting platform called Taqwa Invest. So I've been really, interested and really impressed with the work that they're doing out there. And I'm not sure it's going to go live in the UK at any time, but I think if you're further afield, they will be having markets in India, Pakistan, and those sorts of countries, Bangladesh, hopefully. And I think they're well worth looking at in the future, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Any other questions that you guys wanted to pick up on?
I had some questions that came in through the Instagram page for Mufti specifically. They're on Zakat calculation. So the first one was on pensions. So how do I determine Zakat on pensions before I'm of retirement age?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to pensions, right, we have to understand there's two types of pensions in the markets. One is the defined benefit scheme, which is generally given to those working in the public sector. So if you're working with the NHS, the police, or any other civil servant job, you'll most likely have a defined benefit scheme, which is known as a final salary or even a career average scheme. Those are not zakatable, right? So you can put that aside. It's more about the defined contribution schemes, which attract zakat, whereby you bear the investment risk. You can select which pot you want to invest in or which fund you want to invest in. You have generally more control, although it's locked in for a certain period. You do have volition to choose which fund you want to invest in. Now, those, when it comes to zakat, it all depends on the type of fund that you have. So what I've done at the National Zakat Foundation is I looked at the 100 top pension funds. So I looked at the property funds. I looked at equity funds, Sharia funds, mixed funds, and fixed income funds. And I just calculated a proxy. So, for example, if you are invested in a property fund, if you use 15%, that should cover the zakatable assets, because based on my research, there was no property fund which had more than 15% of zakatable assets in that fund. So you can apply 15% to your holdings. For a Sharia fund, you can apply 26%, right? For an equity fund, 27%. For a mixed fund, it's 50%. And for fixed income, which is not Sharia compliant, of course, it'd be on the full amount, because it's just loans and bonds. That's what it is. So that's one way in dealing with it easily. And the NZF calculator, if you use an NZF calculator, these proxies are coded in to the option. So if you just select the fund, automatically the proxy will be applied.
Oh,
nice. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. And there was one more question, which was, you may have answered it already, which is specifically around investments. So this person is saying that they've invested into an Islamic fund in the US. How do they know how much zakat they have to pay on it, especially if they haven't recognized the return yet from that fund?
I mean, the first stage would be understanding the type of investment. What is the investment? Is it in real estate? Is it in equity? What kind of investment fund is it? That will really then lead to the zakat calculation, because zakat is all about the assets. It's not about just an investment, right? For example, if I invest in land as a long-term store of wealth, there is no zakat on that, right? Zakat is due on certain asset classes. So I would say to that person, first understand the type of asset it is, whether it's zakatable or not. If it's zakatable, then I would say go to the NZF website, nzf.org.uk. There's so much information on zakat there. You probably find there's a knowledge bank, over 400 questions and answers, which I personally have developed, right? So I know that all these questions have been answered there. You're more than welcome to go there. And if that doesn't work, you want to speak to an expert, you can book a one-to-one consultation on the NZF website as well. So there's a link there. You can book a consultation, and you'll get a 15-minute slot with a scholar to speak about your query.
Okay. So listen, guys, we're literally running out of time now. I believe we're going to cut out at 7 o'clock. Jazakallah khair for both of your times. This has been a wonderfully educational and entertaining hour, and thank you so much again. And there'll be more of these sessions in the future, inshallah. We look forward to seeing both of you again.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with both of you.
Take care.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Do the obligatory Zoom wave.